is the ultimate power fantasy. When I was a kid, the original Mortal Kombat movie was all the rage. To this day, it remains one of the few good video game movie adaptations, and it holds up well even now, 30 years later, at least in my book. Maybe it's due to nostalgia, maybe not, I don't know. On the other hand, I think not, because the second one didn't make any impression on anyone, while it supposedly aimed to be bigger and better.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
You will die for this, Jade.
The VHS rental copy of the first movie was a sought-after commodity at the time, and we signed up on the waiting list to have our turn to rent. Everyone wanted to watch it. The fight scene between Reptile and Liu Kang is still one of the most unforgettable fight scenes ever, partly thanks to the insane, heart-pounding soundtrack that turned every kick and flip into a pure adrenaline-filled spectacle. Naturally, as imaginative kids, we all daydreamed of being part of that insane world. We'd throw imaginary scorpion hooks across the school halls, shout "Get over here" like we meant it. We mimicked Liu Kang's fireballs, or froze each other mid-run like we were miniature Sub-Zeros. Mortal Kombat wasn't just a game or a movie, it moved our impressionable selves deeply. Mortal Kombat stayed with me. This childhood fascination carried over from PC and Amiga ports later into the console-exclusive era, when, at some point, Mortal Kombat Armageddon became the party game in our friend group. We created tournaments to duke it out between ourselves, using custom-made characters, because yes, MK Armageddon was, and still is, the only game in the entire franchise that allowed for the creation of your own combatants. We took full advantage of it, building custom characters, giving them wild names, ridiculous outfits, and the most over-the-top and often mismatched movesets we could imagine. We'd set up tournaments in a friend's basement, projected on the wall, turning night-long sessions into our own mini Mortal Kombat tournaments, with brackets and all the shebang. And now, decades later, one thought crept into my mind as a surreal and abstract idea. What if I actually entered the Mortal Kombat tournament? Not as a demigod, not as an inhuman ninja, especially not as a fireball-throwing chosen one, but as just some guy. A background character who accidentally got invited to Shang Tsung's island and now has to fight Goro 1v1. No powers, no mystic bloodline, maybe just some rough training from Master Miyagi, or maybe Sensei Segal if he's free that weekend. There's a chair to sit nearby. Turns out, Mortal Kombat Armageddon is the perfect place to entertain that idea, because this time I can finally build a character who's not a fantasy incarnate, but someone a little more real. No over-the-top outfits, no teleporting uppercuts, just a pair of sneakers, a hoodie, and a faint hope that peak cardio and hundreds of flashy kicks might somehow carry me through the ladder. So question is, can I win the Mortal Kombat tournament as a regular, everyday normal guy? In a single afternoon? Let's find out.
Never give up hope.
This is going to be a two-part challenge. First, I'll attempt to roundhouse kick my way through the tower in a single run, with a hard cap of 7 attempts in total. 7 felt poetic. It's the 7th main game in the series, and I was also 7 years old when I played my first one. I had amazing parenting, I know. There's some character progression involved, skill unlocks, and a small detail that I haven't touched a proper fighting game in decades. So yeah, 7 tries seemed to be reasonable at the time, perhaps a little too confident. Before any punches could be thrown, though, I had to create the normal guy, which turned out to be a quite involved task. The customization options here are absolutely bonkers. Sliders, outfits, accessories, weapons, but most of them are locked behind gold coins, which are received through progress you make in-game, quite the opposite to what's normal now. Because of this, my perfectly average dude is forced into the free tier, amazingly devoid of regular clothes, resulting in what can be only described as a normal guy cosplaying as a ninja. Quite fitting for the channel, not so much for the challenge. Next came the fighting style options, and Mortal Kombat Armageddon generously lets you name it, which is a dangerous amount of power to hand me. Then I chose the most basic and glamorous stance imaginable, the kind of thing you'd learn in a boxing gym, wedged between the local laundromat and the usual kebab place with questionable meat supply. From there, I dove into move customization, fully aware that this was where restraint would truly matter. But once again, gold coins stood between me and anything both simple and realistic. Nothing not over the top to choose, but I wasn't here to be cool. I was here to be relatable and aggressively reasonable. I went for fast, no-nonsense attacks, quick animations, minimal flair, preferably causing enemies to bounce or lift off as much as possible, as I remembered that being a thing in Mortal Kombat Armageddon. And throughout all of this, the same background track played on loop for the entire 40 minutes it took to build the first version of the normal guy. I didn't mind it at all, as the track was very groovy. There's also a whole system for creating armed combat style, but I decided that given the constraint of having a single afternoon for this as a part of the challenge, it would be best to focus on hand-to-hand combat. This means the normal guy stays strategically weapon-free. Choosing special moves was a sobering experience. The normal guy rule immediately disqualified about 99% of Mortal Kombat's greatest hits. Fireballs? Nope. Teleportation? Also nope. Anything involving violating several laws of physics was a hard pass. The one exception seemed to be a flying kick, which, in some extremely generous interpretation, could be learned by a regular human who ignores fears of falling over and over again. Compared to summoning hellfire, it felt painfully reasonable. After all that tinkerage, the normal guy was officially ready for basic training. The first thing that hit me emotionally and visually was how tiny the normal guy looked standing next to Kung Lao. Kung Lao here appears to spend roughly 5 hours a day lifting weights, 7 days a week, and drinks his green tea with 2 spoons of HGH. Movement felt very different from what still burned into my muscle memory from MK4, as my few stints with MKA on consoles I didn't own were not enough to build any of it. I wasn't expecting miracles in a single afternoon, but this quiet one-on-one with the physics alone told me this was a different universe now. After about 7 minutes of learning the basics, some basic confidence kicked in, the dangerous kind of confidence. I decided I was ready to attempt the tower in one go. The goal was simple on paper: knock out 7 fighters and then face Blaze at the top of the pyramid. Perfectly simple, like climbing Everest in everyday normal guy sneakers. Attempt 1 opened with Striker, who immediately warned me not to abuse the flying kick by punching me in the face the moment after I tried. Message received. He wasted absolutely no time turning this fight into an educational experience. I tried chaining a few bounces, and honestly, it worked better than expected. Still, this was very much a warm-up bout. That said, I took a great personal joy in ending it quickly. Relaxation factors matters when you're a normal guy in Mortal Kombat. The following opponent was Shinnok, former big bad of Mortal Kombat 4, and essentially back then Shang Tsung version 1.1. The fight kept that warm-up energy, but something uncomfortable became clear. Everyone else had projectiles, and I had mediocre opinions, some back pains, bills to pay, and my fists. Same issue with movement-based special attacks. They had blink attacks, I had poor reflexes. Even so, after 3 solid rounds, Shinnok was out. Fight number 3 was against Rain, and I suppose the color of his attire was never a coincidence. The difficulty spike was immediate. Suddenly, we were trading blows instead of me asserting dominance through mild button mashing. It became painfully obvious that I was the underqualified guy in the room. The normal guy was visibly annoyed, as if he was told by the DMD that he misses some papers, which only made things worse when Rain turned him into a human pinball. At that point, the match crossed into what I can only describe as noob abuse. I tried to contribute my 2 cents to the conversation, like a first-time heckler at a comedy club, but Rain held the microphone and knew all the right rebuttals. The final round dissolved into all-in button mashing, punctuated by brief flashes of good play that gave me a false hope. Rain ignored all of it and finished the job. Attempt 1 was swiftly ended. After a 2-minute combat crash course with zombie Liu Kang, it felt correcto to jump back in for attempt number 2. Scorpion and Shinnok went down fast. but something told me that Scorpion was the kind of guy to hold a grudge for a long time. Anyways, the third fight, however, was Sector, and things immediately got disrespectful. He had the same fighting intelligence Rain showed earlier, except now it came bundled with rockets and 2 lightsabers. It wasn't pretty, but it was fair in a very Mortal Kombat way, tit for tat, hit for hit, and the flying kick kept me bailing out of trouble. I had no idea how to perform breakers, but I refused to look it up because this run was strictly old school, and this kind of knowledge you'd normally uncover buried in a gaming magazine. Somehow, against logic and good sense, I survived and unlocked the 4th fight. Now Jarek was a major douche. He fought in a similar style to mine, just with more flash and zang, plus the unnecessary flair, while being slightly lacking at timing his liftoffs. The first round ended with me getting folded again, and somehow I learned absolutely nothing from it. Jarek followed up with a parade of ridiculous attacks, as if he was personally offended by my mediocre presence. I hit back when I could, chipped away at his health, and slowly dragged the fight back into balance. We were even, briefly, until he went full offense in the following round, peppering me with constant punches and finishing it off with a blink and you missed it X-Slash. The round after that, momentum swung my way and I evened the score once more. By round 5, I was landing launchers, tossing Jarek around the arena and asserting what little authority the normal guy could muster in this universe. He wasn't clean and there was resistance every step of the way, but I pushed through and earned my ticket to fight number 5. This time around, the normal guy ran straight into his arch-enemy, Rain. From the opening seconds, it was clear this was not a rematch. He was even more troublesome than before and immediately gave me the full Dragon Ball treatment, beating me up mid-air like my power level was decisively subpar. The outcome was painfully predictable. The following round didn't ease up, but I had one clear goal: send Rain to the spikes. Against all odds, it worked. For a brief, glorious moment, revenge was served. Rain, however, treated this as a clerical error and promptly corrected the scoreboard in rapid succession. The 4th round turned into a highlight reel of his combos, special attacks, and breakers, and before I could mentally process any of it, the normal guy was face down. On the bright side, the defeat paid with comfort money. With some coins in my pocket, it was time to refine the moveset. I double-checked the special moves. None of them qualified, unless you personally know someone who can fire a missile from their chest or vomit acid on command. Disabling attacks were out, charge attacks were out, and basically anything cool was disqualified in sight. Still, I managed to unlock a few new basic moves and gave the normal guy a wardrobe update. The ninja phase was over. Now he actually looked like a regular everyday normal guy. However, the next few tower attempts painted a grim picture. I became doubtful if I am going to complete both challenges in any shape or form without becoming a full-time Mortal Kombat player, which would take more time than a single afternoon. Back to the drawing board, I tweaked my moveset for slightly faster attacks, spending another 90 seconds training and replacing some slower hits with faster elbows and kicks. I felt the moment had arrived. The final attempt of the first challenge was calling, and the normal guy was ready to throw everything, including dignity, at the tower one last time. This time around, the intro fights felt like a warm-up jog. Sindel, despite her relentless spam of special attacks, was surprisingly manageable. Johnny Cage was a decent opponent, but his nunchucks and bare torso were no match for my fighting style. Then came Havoc, the cleric of chaos. I had no idea what his shtick was, but I quickly learned he's a major pain in the rear. He was annoying with his little jabs, but the first round went my way. Small victory, big morale boosts. I kept pressing the offense, but Havoc started cranking up his jabs and pokes, and I had to give him credit. He outplayed me fair and square. Round 3 felt like standing against a ripped kung fu zombie, bashing me with a morning star. The next round became a fight for survival. Havoc kept poking and smashing with his mace, but I turned the situation around with nicely timed kicks. The final round was the ultimate test, both to keep the challenge going and to improve my personal best. I started okay-ish, keeping Havoc at bay for a while, but inevitably his relentless jabs and mace swings shredded my health bar, and to truly drive the point home, he finished the match by stealing some of my organs and snapping a few limbs along the way.
Havoc wins.
The first challenge ended in defeat, but the day still wasn't a total loss. Up until that point, I gained an hour and a half of relevant combat experience in Mortal Kombat Armageddon, but I realized that the Tower Iron Man run wasn't exactly the best teacher. Restarting after each loss felt like hitting the reset button on my learning rhythm, with the first 2 or 3 fights being way too easy to count as meaningful practice. That would change with the second challenge, and the intensity cranked up to 11. Challenge 2 had a simple rule: beat Mortal Kombat Armageddon as normal guy within a single hour, starting from the very first fight. I rushed through the opening battles as fast as my fingers could handle. The first guy went down in about a minute, and the next one in 15 seconds more, though I wasted a few precious moments by ringing him throughout the ventilation shaft. Three minutes in, I faced Ermac. After mowing him down in 20 seconds, I think I hurt his pride, because the next 2 rounds were brutal. He abused me with every trick in his arsenal, stealing victories right from under my nose. But the normal guy dusted himself off, adjusted his metaphorical crown, and got back to work. The floor quickly became a bloody mess. Ermac was a dirty fighter, constantly abusing his powers, but this time it was the normal guy who stole the win. Round 5 was personal, a back and forth slugfest, each blow exchanged with decent precision. In the end, my kicks prevailed, and by the 7-minute mark I was off to the next fight, feeling a mix of exhaustion, exhilaration, and just a hint of disbelief that this was actually working. After beating Mocap in a rematch, and taking 7 minutes and a couple of tries to defeat Hotaru, it was him, the man, the legend, Scorpion. I could only assume he had something very special planned for me because of the grudge from earlier, you know. 21 minutes and 25 seconds in, our match began, and I was under the impression that my opening move did not sit well with him. What followed was nothing short of a relentless barrage of punishment. Every swing, every strike, every chain seemed personally designed to make me question taking on this challenge. His intensity was unmatched, a pure embodiment of "you're going to regret it." I didn't know how to counter it. The guy was on a crusade to show me the meaning of pain. The next fight opened surprisingly well for me. I managed to keep up some pressure, and for the moment I was impressed that the normal guy had survived this long. But Scorpion was determined to remind me that an everyday, ordinary man is simply no match for his awe-inspiring ninja prowess. I got flattened, and the normal guy just wished this would end. And despite all that, he managed to keep up with him. And many weird exchanges later, and bouncing off the walls like he was a ball in Blobby Volley video game, he managed to force through his attacks and net another win in this improbable bout. Scorpion wasn't happy about it, and I noticed a terrifying truth. Once he gets on a streak, he's unstoppable. Like a freight train in full motion, I desperately begged the gods for some teleportation trick, a fireball, anything to close the distance like he does, but my prayers went unheard. However, the last round was quite intriguing and nothing short of cinematic. Both Scorpion and Normal Guy engaged with each other like martial artists in their prime, blocking, dodging, making small whiffs and little jabs. For a fleeting, glorious moment, Normal Guy almost had it, but of course, this is Mortal Kombat, and nothing good lasts forever. Scorpion shifted into full obliteration mode and wiped me out completely. Not a single hit landed in my favor for dozens of seconds. That seemed like eternity. It was brutal, humbling, and utterly unforgettable. The next 2 fights were a capital punishment for the normal guy. Scorpion turned up the heat to unbearable levels, chaining launchers into sword swings and special moves seemingly out of nowhere. I couldn't help but admire his style, precise, fluid, and terrifyingly effective. Some of his moves even felt familiar. High kicks, sweeps, fast short punches, almost like looking into a lethal hellish mirror. But in the middle of all of that relentless assault, I suppose that's how the movie Johnny Cage felt, facing him back in the 1994 movie, with Fear Factory blasting in the background, mostly powerless, occasionally connecting a lucky hit, but otherwise at the mercy of a master. Even when I thought I had him on the ropes, he'd instantly recompose, counter-attack with pinpoint precision and ire to flip the fight on its head, like some chess program that predicts you're 10 steps ahead. Then came the moment when enough was enough. I really truly tried this time. every muscle tensed, every punch feeling like it was aimed directly at my own chin. I realized I had to stop letting him chain those freight train combos and put a muzzle on his aggression. The next round, I felt in control until he comboed me into oblivion again. Somehow, I managed to derail the train, breaking his fear-inducing trance of aggression. By the third round, it was clear. He was a heavy hitter, but so was I. I sent him flying to the lower level, and finally matched his intensity with my own. I was sick and tired of his sword bounce attacks, so I sent him flying as well. He wanted to steal that round, I could tell, but I refused. I knew if I let him, he'd chase me endlessly afterward. So I gave him a taste of his own medicine, launching him high into the sky. And at long last, after 15 exhausting minutes of pure Mortal Kombat chaos, I defeated him 3-0. My favorite character in the franchise, finally conquered by a completely normal everyday guy. I finally climbed to the top of the tower, and the first thing that slipped out of my mouth upon seeing my adversary was a very unflattering "You're one ugly motherfucker." But there was no time for commentary. Within a couple of hits, I realized this fight was on a whole different level. His reactions were faster than anything I'd faced before. His chains and combos flowed seamlessly, and for the first time, I got taken out by an environmental kill. The battle with Scorpion had drained me, but the upside of this challenge was undeniable. I was learning at lightning speed, forced to adapt by facing enemies who actually demanded it. This opponent wasn't just strong, he was a monster who outclassed me in every way, and yet, fighting him made me better. I started experimenting with hit and run tactics instead of non-stop offense. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it backfired spectacularly, but there came a round where I couldn't resist, and I put the beast through the grinder. 2 wins in, and I couldn't deny the fact that beating up such vile monstrosity felt satisfying, although he seemingly had more of what I could call poise in Dark Souls terms, and every attack made my innards wince. He was a sub-boss after all, and he had Goro's vibe in his attack power. Fighting him was like facing off a raging bull who had a black belt in karate. Despite the power gap, I often managed to give him a good run for his money. There was a moment when the normal guy nearly threw him into the meat grinder again, a fleeting taste of triumph, but he slipped away. Even with clever tactics and well-timed strikes, Moloch eventually overwhelmed me. But after receiving this absolutely enormous-sized can of whoop-ass, something inside me finally snapped. Frustration boiled over, and the normal guy transformed into a pure, distilled form of focused bloodlust and rage. And what happened next? Well, it was surgical. Normal guy became every punch, every kick, every flying kick, elbow and knee all at once. This was Mortal Kombat with capital K. Every movement deliberate, every strike precise, every motion carrying weight and consequence. It was controlled devastation, demolition. I was no longer just an everyday normal guy. I had become an unstoppable barrage of fury, and the scene only lacked a pulsing techno track in the background to match the intensity, and it worked. Moloch fell, finally, but the cost of victory was enormous. This beating the living crap out of each other lasted for 15 minutes, leaving the normal guy battered, bruised, tired, and dangerously low on time. Less than 10 minutes remained to complete the final stretch of the challenge, and now I had to beat the final boss in less time than it had taken to beat either Scorpion or Moloch. No pressure, I guess. Normal guy had no idea what Blaze was to begin with, but the rumor has it he was the background character in the pit area from Mortal Kombat 2, the first Mortal Kombat I ever played. This meant we had some lore in common. Still, no knowledge of special moves, no combos, no clues what kind of devastation this being could unleash. This fight was a brutal crash course in facing someone far more powerful than yourself. Most of the time, they seemed on par with the skill, but Blaze had that visible edge, raw power, special attacks, reach that constantly tilted the scales against me. Despite the fact the fight required 100% of my current ability, I felt it was a matter of time I didn't have, as nearly 7 minutes remained before I'd failed the challenge, and there were many close calls that could have taken the fight either way. This didn't change the fact that Blaze steamrolled me with his special attacks, which for sure would come in handy at times, and perhaps would make for an amazing finale. but I had none of that. I had only weak reflexes and tired instinct to rely on, a far cry from my MK form decades ago. On a global scale, and with 2 hours under my belt, I was far from being noteworthy, and Normalguy seemed a perfect metaphor for my average skill. I needed 2 wins, yet Blaze leveraged his size and reach and stole the victory right from under my nose. One by one with his amazing power. With only 2.5 minutes left, I realized this very fight would make or break the entire challenge. The tension was thick, like a bomb about to detonate. I started regretting every second wasted in earlier skirmishes that could have ended faster. I had no idea it would come down to such razor-thin timing, where a split-second mistake could cost everything, but there was no time to dwell. Focus was everything. Round 2 kicked off with Blaze immediately flattening half of my health bar, tossing me around like the kind of movie villain who refuses just to rip the protagonist apart in one swift motion. I was always far from being a clutch fighter, and recovering from that much damage to actually score a win wasn't exactly my specialty, but this time I got close, chipping away at him with pokes and long kicks, testing his defenses, staying alive by sheer willpower. By the end of the round, it was a draw, and the clock was merciless. Barely a minute left before the challenge would slip through my fingers. The fight showed no signs of breaking in my favor. Every exchange was even on both ends, measured and brutally unforgiving. At that moment, a miracle was the only way forward. But then I unleashed the weirdest, most chaotic chain of attacks I had ever performed. 1-2 kicks mixed in with unpredictable sweeps on repeat, and within a couple of seconds, this randomness obliterated his health bar. He staggered to his feet, enraged, and I only had 37 seconds left on the clock. I began the offense with 2 elbows, after which I wanted to repeat the same strat, only for Blaze to low-key indicate that this ain't going to happen. Tried again, and he doubled down on denial of the strats. However, 1-2 kick with an elbow worked, and Normalguy was that much closer to victory. Then, with just 10 seconds on the clock, I dodged his massive hammer fist and went to counter-attack. Flying kick. He rebuffed it with a double lift-off. 1-2 kick. Sweep. Another 1-2, and his desperate breaker, and then my final jump attack. Blaze exploded in pain. The second challenge ended at 1 hour and 2 seconds. This meant I failed both of them. I didn't beat Mortal Kombat in 7 attempts, nor did I manage to beat the game afterwards within 1 hour, after decades of no fighting games in sight. But stepping into Mortal Kombat as just some guy, no powers, no destiny, no VFX driven combos, provided me a lesson to learn from. The fantasy we chase doesn't have to be about winning, but the journey. This one is about building power through showing up and learning where it seems like you don't belong. It's about facing overwhelming odds, knowing full well you're just a guy who has house chores to catch up on every Saturday and who hurt his back lifting a couch some time ago. Because when everyone else is throwing magic or teleporting across the screen and you're still in there throwing jab hooks and 1-2 kicks with sore knees and questionable sense of timing, that's your version of courage. Maybe we don't need to be chosen warriors or apprentices in Asian ninja clans. Maybe it's enough to say, I don't have superpowers, but I'm here.
Let's dance.
In the end, I didn't beat the 2 challenges I set up for myself, but I did something way harder. I entered Mortal Kombat as a regular, everyday normal guy who won it in well under 3 hours and who can now put this fantasy to its rightful rest. Thank you for taking part in it by listening until the end. Subscribe. Until next time. Bye!